Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm a 28-year-old woman living in France, and I've been dealing with anxiety and depression since my teenage years. My story with pills is complicated. Back in high school, I was severely depressed. My parents had just divorced, and I was struggling to cope with the changes in my life. One night, after a rough day of being bullied at school, I made a decision that would impact me for years to come. I gathered all the sleeping pills I could find in our medicine cabinet and swallowed them, hoping to end it all. Fortunately, my mother found me in time and rushed me to the hospital. They managed to save me, but the experience left me with severe trauma when it comes to swallowing pills. Since then, I've been working with various doctors and therapists to manage my mental health. They've been incredibly understanding of my situation, always trying to find alternative medications when possible. I've learned to cope by either crushing pills into powder or dissolving them in water when I absolutely have to take them. It's not ideal, but it works for me. This morning I woke up feeling absolutely terrible. My throat was on fire, and I could barely speak. I managed to get an early appointment with my doctor, who diagnosed me with a severe throat infection. She's familiar with my history and always tries to accommodate my needs. When prescribing medication, she opted for a liquid antibiotic solution typically used for infants, explaining that I just need to take triple the regular dose. I stopped at a pharmacy I'd never been to before on my way to work. The place was busy, with at least a dozen people waiting for their prescriptions. When it was finally my turn, I approached the counter where a pharmacist was working. She seemed new, constantly turning to her colleagues for help with various procedures. I greeted her with a simple good morning and handed over my prescription along with my social security card and insurance information. She spent some time typing on her computer before looking at me with an expression that made me uncomfortable. The pharmacist pointed out rather coldly that the medication was for babies. I explained that I was aware of this and mentioned that I needed to take triple the dose because it was easier for me to take medicine that way. Her response was to let out an audible snort that made my stomach clench. She then proceeded to tell me that I was an adult and made a pointed comment about how I was way over the required weight for the pills. Her comment about my weight stung. At 105 kilograms, I'm well aware of my size, but it had absolutely nothing to do with my prescription. I took a deep breath, trying to stay composed, despite my exhaustion from 2 sleepless nights. I repeated that I knew this but still wanted the liquid medicine, and asked her to please just give me the bottles so I could get to work. She seemed annoyed but went to check their stock. When she returned empty-handed, I knew this wasn't going to be simple. She told me that they were out of stock and would need to order it, saying it would arrive by Thursday. I was considering whether to place the order or try another pharmacy during my lunch break when she decided to make things worse. In a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, she asked if I thought it was childish to not be able to swallow pills at my age. Her voice carried across the pharmacy, ensuring that both her fellow pharmacists and the customers could hear her judgment. I felt my face burning with embarrassment, but something inside me snapped. Years of dealing with judgment and shame bubbled to the surface, and I decided I wasn't going to let this slide. I responded loudly enough for everyone to hear, telling her that I used to be better at taking pills before I tried to kill myself by swallowing sedatives in high school. I added that nearly dying tends to make swallowing pills difficult. The silence that followed was deafening. The pharmacist's face drained of color, and she started stammering something that might have been an apology. I didn't wait to hear it. I grabbed my prescription and cards from the counter, shoved them into my handbag, and walked out with my head held high. As I drove past the pharmacy a few minutes later, I noticed she was no longer at the counter. One of her colleagues was speaking to what appeared to be the head pharmacist, who looked absolutely furious. Later that day, I received a call from the pharmacy's owner, who apologized profusely for the incident and assured me that appropriate action would be taken. He explained that the pharmacist in question had been suspended pending a formal review of her conduct. He also told me that they would be implementing additional training for all staff members regarding sensitivity and patient privacy. The owner offered to have my prescription delivered to my workplace free of charge, which I accepted. True to his word, I received my medication that afternoon, along with a written apology from the pharmacy. The whole experience left me shaking, but for the first time in years, I felt proud of standing up for myself. It's taken me a long time to accept that my trauma doesn't make me weak or childish, and I won't let anyone shame me for doing what I need to do to take care of myself. I've been living on my own since I was 18, working various jobs to put myself through college while studying computer science. It wasn't easy, but I managed to graduate and even save enough to buy myself a decent used car. It's not fancy, but it's reliable, and most importantly, it's mine, bought with my own hard-earned money. My aunt has always been difficult. She's my mom's younger sister, and while my mom is the most hard-working person I know, her sister is quite the opposite. She's never held a job for more than 6 months, always blaming others for her failures. She's also notorious in our family for asking to borrow things and either returning them broken or not at all. Last week, I finally got a call back for a job interview at one of the top tech companies in our city. The position was perfect: junior software developer with great benefits and room for growth. I was excited but nervous, spending days preparing for it. The day before the interview, I got a call from my aunt. She immediately demanded to borrow my car for the next day. When I explained that I couldn't let her have it because I had an important job interview, she asked about the timing. I told her it was at 2 p.m., and she immediately jumped on that, saying she only needed it in the morning and would have it back by noon. I still refused, explaining that I couldn't risk it because the interview was too important. That's when she started getting angry. She accused me of being selfish, explaining that she needed to run errands and her car was in the shop. When I stood my ground, she called me an ungrateful brat and started ranting about everything she'd supposedly done for me. She claimed she used to babysit me when I was little. She didn't. My mom always hired actual babysitters because she didn't trust her sister, and that she bought me expensive gifts. She gave me a used notebook once for Christmas. The call ended when she started cursing at me and I hung up. The next day, I went down to my parking spot at 1 p.m. wanting to arrive early for the interview. My car wasn't there. At first, I thought I was remembering wrong about where I parked, but after checking the entire lot, I realized what had happened. I called the police immediately and told them about my suspicions regarding my aunt. They took it seriously, especially after I explained about the call from the previous day. While waiting for news, I called a rideshare service to get to my interview. I wasn't going to let her ruin this opportunity. The interview went well despite my stress about the situation. When I got out, I had several missed calls from the police. They had found my car in my aunt's driveway, exactly where I suspected it would be. What happened next was both infuriating and satisfying. When the police approached her, she first tried to claim it was her car. When they pointed out it didn't match the registration they had on file for her, she changed her story and said I had given her permission to take it. When they asked about the key, she started to panic and stammered out that she had lost it. The officers then told her she was under arrest for grand theft auto and told her to step out of the house. That's when things got really crazy. My aunt, all 5 feet 2 inches of her, decided she wasn't going to jail. She shoved the female officer so hard that the officer fell backward and hit the ground. The backup officer, this huge guy who looked like he bench-pressed cars for fun, didn't take kindly to that. He took her down hard, and suddenly my poor defenseless aunt was face down on her front lawn, screaming about police brutality while being handcuffed. I pressed charges, of course. During the court proceedings, it came out that she had made a copy of my key months ago when she helped me bring groceries up to my apartment one time. She had been planning something like this for a while, apparently. She ended up getting charged with grand theft auto, assault on a police officer, resisting arrest, and possession of stolen property. They found other things in her house that belonged to various family members. The judge wasn't impressed by her tearful performance in court, especially after hearing testimony from multiple family members about her history of similar behavior. She got 3 years in prison, 5 years probation after that, and was ordered to pay restitution to me and the officer she assaulted. My mom, who had always tried to keep the peace, finally admitted it was time to cut ties with her sister. I got the job, by the way. During my first week, I treated myself to a new set of locks for my car and an expensive security system. I work at the local hospital as a nurse, and I've been doing this job for about 3 years now. I live alone in a small apartment about 4 miles from the hospital, and I get around everywhere on my trusty single-speed bike. It's not fancy, but it's reliable and gets me where I need to go. My sister, though, she's always been the golden child in our family. Our parents gave her everything she wanted, and she went to an expensive private college while I worked my way through community college. She's never had to really work for anything in her life. The whole drama started when she found out I regularly eat at the hospital cafeteria. I know it sounds ridiculous, but she completely lost it when she learned about this. When she first found out, she started ranting about how disgusting it was that I would eat at a hospital, saying there were sick people there. I tried explaining that the cafeteria was actually really good and run by a separate company that made fresh food daily. She wouldn't listen, and instead accused me of embarrassing our family, asking what people would think if they saw me eating there. I pointed out that where I eat lunch doesn't affect anyone else, but that just made her more angry. She kept going on about it for weeks, telling our parents, posting about it on social media, and trying to get her friends to agree with her. But nobody did. The more people dismissed her concerns, the angrier she got. Then one day, I came out of work to find my bike missing. I immediately checked the security cameras. Perks of working at a hospital, they have cameras everywhere. What I saw made my blood boil. My sister and 2 of her friends had loaded my bike into their minivan earlier that day. I called her immediately. When I asked her where my bike was, she tried playing dumb and asked what bike I was talking about. I told her I had video of her and her friends taking it and threatened to call the police if she didn't return it. That's when she got smug, saying maybe if I stopped eating at that disgusting cafeteria, I'd find out where my bike was. I was furious but kept my cool. I called our parents first. When I told our mom that her daughter had stolen my bike and was trying to blackmail me about where I eat lunch, she was shocked and outraged. After a lot of screaming, mostly from our parents to my sister, she finally revealed that they had thrown my bike into Miller's Pond on the edge of town. I managed to fish it out that evening. Thankfully, being a simple bike, it survived with just some basic maintenance needed. But the story doesn't end there. My sister's friend's parents found out what they did. The minivan they used belonged to one of them, and let's just say those parents were not happy. My sister's friends completely turned on her, blaming her for the whole thing. They even showed everyone the text messages where she planned the whole thing. Our parents finally had enough. They made her get a job and forced her to move out of their house. They bought her a bicycle as her only transportation, a used cruiser bike that she has to ride everywhere because they refused to help her buy a car. She threw a fit about it, whining that it wasn't fair and that she couldn't show up to work on a bicycle because everyone would laugh at her. Our dad shut that down quickly, telling her she should have thought about that before throwing my bike in a pond. Now she has to share an apartment with 3 other people because she can't afford to live alone, and she has to ride her bike 3 miles to work every day, rain or shine. She tried to blame me for her situation, but even our parents shut that down fast. Our mom told her straight up that she did this to herself, pointing out that I ride my bike because I choose to, while she has to ride hers because they had no choice but to stop enabling her. The last time I saw her, she was struggling up a hill on her cruiser bike, looking miserable in her office clothes. She still glares at me whenever we cross paths, especially when she sees me happily riding my bike. I still eat at the hospital cafeteria every day, and now our whole family joins me there sometimes, except for her, of course. She still refuses to eat there, but now nobody cares what she thinks anymore. My wife and I bought our dream home 2 years ago after saving up for nearly a decade. We're both teachers at the local high school, and while the pay isn't spectacular, we managed to find this beautiful house in a quiet suburb that fit perfectly within our budget. The previous owners had installed an amazing irrigation system and maintained the yard meticulously, which was one of the main selling points for us since we love gardening. Everything was peaceful until last Thursday when our next door neighbors decided they wanted to build a pool in their backyard. Now, I have nothing against pools, but what happened next was just ridiculous. It started when they approached my wife while I was still at school, grading papers for my science class. They needed us to sign something called a use of yard waiver because they couldn't get their construction equipment to their backyard without going through our property. When I got home, my wife told me about the neighbor's visit and explained that they needed about 10 feet of clearance to move their equipment through. She mentioned that they had promised to fix any damage to the grass. I immediately had concerns because we have both irrigation lines and internet cables running through that section of the yard. I decided to contact the pool company directly on Friday to get more details. When I spoke with the project manager, he revealed that they actually needed between 10 to 12 feet of clearance. He also confirmed that they needed the waiver because there was a high probability the ground would be completely torn up during the process. This was already different from what our neighbors had told us, but before I could properly think it through, they threw another curveball at us. Our neighbors were apparently leaving for Florida and wanted an answer within 48 hours. Talk about pressure tactics. That weekend was supposed to be special. It was my wife's 30th birthday, and I had planned several celebrations with our friends and family. But on Saturday afternoon, right in the middle of our preparations, our neighbor showed up at our door asking about our decision on the waiver. I explained to him that I wasn't comfortable signing it as is because of several typos, lack of notarization, and vague terms about repairs. He didn't take it well at all. He started complaining about how much money he was going to lose if there were delays. Before I could even finish explaining my concerns, he stormed out of our house, slamming the door behind him. But it gets better. Today, the project manager from the pool company showed up at our door, trying to play mediator. When he asked what they could do to resolve the situation, I told him that I really didn't want my yard torn up, but at minimum, we'd need a new, properly drafted waiver to even discuss it further. That's when he tried to claim there was an electrical easement extending 1.5 feet into our yard exactly where they needed access. He suggested they could just call for access based on that. But I'd studied our plat design and deed thoroughly when we bought the house. There was no such easement in that area. When I pointed this out, the project manager's face turned red, and he quickly made his exit. Later that evening, we got a series of angry texts from our neighbors. They accused us of ruining their pool plans and claimed we were being difficult for no reason. They even tried to guilt us by saying everyone else in the neighborhood would have helped out. When we responded that their rushing tactics and lies about easements didn't help their case, they just got angrier. I decided to install security cameras the next day just in case they tried to move their equipment through our yard without permission. 2 days later, we noticed the pool company's trucks parked in front of their house. I went out to check what was happening and found them attempting to access our neighbor's backyard through their other neighbor's property, who apparently had also refused to sign their waiver. We later learned from another neighbor that they hadn't even secured proper permits from the city for the pool construction. The city inspector showed up the following week and shut down their entire project. Turns out their lot size didn't even meet the minimum requirements for an in-ground pool. They're still giving us the cold shoulder at neighborhood gatherings, but my yard, irrigation system, and internet lines remain intact, which is all that matters to us. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.